The secret history of the first duel in God of War Ragnarok reveals that Thor's decision to revive Kratos after killing him was not an act of mercy, but a calculated execution of Odin's will. While the world saw a senseless brawl on the frozen lake, the lore reveals it to be a calibration of the prophecy. Thor revived Kratos because the ghost of Sparta was required to be functional for the All-Father's ultimate plan. The lore of this encounter is the lore of the unfinished debt. Its purpose was the verification of the god-killer's worth. The history of this revival is the history of the Asur's Leash, where Thor restores the pulse of his enemy to ensure that the shadow plays its part in the coming storm. This is the nadir of the warrior's pride, proving that in the Nine Realms, death is a privilege that can be denied by the god of thunder, and that Kratos is a prisoner of fate who is not permitted to die until his utility to Odin is exhausted. This was the era of the refused rest, where the Thunderer became the Lazarus architect of the Spartans' agony. The lore of the calibration duel provides the psychological foundation for this resurrection. Thor was sent by Odin not to end Kratos, but to see the monster beneath the father. The lore suggests that Kratos was holding back, which offended the All-Father's strategy. Its purpose was the forced reversion to the Shura. When Thor kills Kratos with a hammer strike to the temple, he realizes that the ghost has given up on his true nature. By restarting Kratos' heart with a bolt of lightning, Thor is resetting the duel to coax out the killer. This reveals the manipulative purpose of the fall. Odin needs the angry Kratos to destabilize the prophecies of the giants. The rise of the defibrillation was the end of the Spartans' peace, proving that life is a weapon that Odin refuses to retire until the blade has cut the right targets. The physical manifestation of Mjolnir's spark provides insight into the atmospheric torture of the fall. The lightning used to revive Kratos was not natural, but infused with the will of the Aesir. The lore of the revived corpse explains that its purpose was the demonstration of the Aesir's authority over the grave. Thor mocks Kratos, stating, "I say when we're done." This reveals the dominant purpose of the Thunderer's duel. Thor is establishing that Kratos does not own his own mortality. This was the era of the divine arrogance. This shows that the history of the revival is a history of the insult, where the god of war is reminded that he is nothing but a pawn on Odin's board, and that his blood is property of the great raven. The relationship between Thor and the blood debt represents the personal vengeance within the fall. Thor owed Kratos a debt of blood for the deaths of Magni and Modi. However, the lore suggests that Odin's commands overrode Thor's grief. Its purpose was the suspension of the vendetta. Thor revived Kratos because killing him too early would be a waste of a valuable catalyst. This reveals the instrumental purpose of the resurrection. Thor is a broken tool using a broken god to satisfy a cruel master. This was the era of the delayed retribution. The history of the strike is the history of the tease, which shows the victim the afterlife only to yank them back into the cold of the living world. Furthermore, the lore of the Aesir's need for the general represents the strategic desperation of the fall. Odin suspected that Kratos was the key to opening the mask. The lore suggests that Kratos needed to be tested to ensure he was strong enough to survive the journey to Asgard. Its purpose was the hardening of the asset. By killing and reviving him, Thor ensures that Kratos is alert and dangerous. This reveals the educational purpose of the revival. It was a lesson in lethality. This was the era of the violent awakening. This shows that the history of the duel is a history of the Polish, where the hammer strikes the blade to sharpen it for the final war that will consume the Nine Realms. The relationship between the death screen deception and the player's perception represents the metatextual horror of the fall. The game mocks the player's failure by faking a game over. The lore suggests that Thor is breaking the fourth wall of destiny. Its purpose was the erasure of the player's agency. This reveals the totalitarian purpose of the Aesir They control even the mechanics of the death. This was the era of the narrative trap. The history of the revival is the history of the chain, which binds the player and the protagonist to the will of the developer's god, proving that Ragnarok is a script that cannot be refused. The lore of the hammer's memory represents the subconscious linking of the rivals within the fall. Mjolnir remembered the impact on Kratos' soul. The lore suggests that Kratos and Thor are two halves of the same tragedy. Its purpose was the identification of the mirror. Thor revived Kratos because he recognized a fellow destroyer who deserved to die properly at Ragnarok, not in a backyard brawl. This reveals the professional purpose of the resurrection. Thor wanted a real fight from a real god. This shows that the history of the strike is a history of the respect, which is paid in sparks and resurrected hearts, even as the killer despises the victim. The act concludes with the silent realization of the ghost of Sparta. As Kratos gasps for air and clutches his chest, the Slayer realizes that the Thor revival was the universal confirmation of the divine enslavement. It showed that death is the only exit Odin has blocked. The purpose of the resurrection was to be the universal reminder of the prophecy's weight. It showed that Kratos cannot escape his role by dying. The Slayer understands that the All-Father is keeping him alive to burn the world. The rise of the second phase is the final movement of the resurrection lore, proving that in the world of God of War, gods do not grant life, they lease it to the damned for the price of the apocalypse that is coming for them all. The legacy of the revival in this chapter is the horror of the denied mortality. We realize that healing is a weapon and resurrection is an arrest. The purpose of the workshop of the thunder was to perfect the tool, and the fall was the loss of the Spartan's choice. As Thor laughs and flies into the sky, leaving Kratos shaking on the ice, hearing the ringing in his ears that sounds like the laughter of Odin, they understand that the history of the revival is the history of the puppet, a puppet that must dance until the strings are burned by the fire of the Ragnarok. The history of the thunder is the history of the wake-up call, a call that summons the ghost from the grave to face the world he tried to forget.